Welcome! So in front of me I actually have just the freshly arrived, hopefully, Pixel. At least I think that's what it is. So let's go over unboxing along with a quick overview of this brand new phone. Oh, come on, how much can you package it? There we go, nice. Starting off, I do like to always mention this. Nicely done, Pixel. I really like the inclusion of these tiny little pull tabs. There's such a little minute thing that doesn't really add much challenge to actually add it, but makes the unboxing just much more pleasurable. And considering I do this quite often, I can tell you it does add a little bit more joy to me. Anyway, I just popped it straight open. So this is, obviously you can see, Pixel 7, not the 7 Pro. And let's just get straight to it. So right off the bat you have this visor-like back. It has a quite hefty little pop-out. Then in here we get a conversion from Type-C to USB-A. Really nice to have this included. Again, didn't need to be included, but it is, and greatly appreciate. And obviously the cable with no charger. Now cable is Type-C to Type-C. Then we have a little Bible right here, and that's about it. So I'm just gonna put that back in here, move this to the side, and let's move over to the phone. There we go, it's turning on. So, quickly mentioning the display, which you can see right now. This is a 6.3-inch display, so on a relatively compact size, for at least nowadays. It's a 1080p by 2400 display, so obviously a pretty standard resolution. Obviously you don't need any like high resolution, I would say. The 1080p for such a size of a phone, it's already pretty nice. Now this is a AMOLED display. Unfortunately, it is peaking refresh rate at 90 Hz, which why only 90? So that's a little bit of a downside right here. Now I'll mention this right now, the price of this phone. So it comes at around $500 US, give or take some. But about 500, so it's priced more towards like a mid-range to high or a low flagship price. The reason why I say low flagship price is because I literally did an unboxing of ZTE Nubia Red Magic. I think it was the 7, which comes with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. So that's a flagship processor, also 140 or 165 Hz refresh rate, AMOLED display and all that stuff, and it costed right about the same amount. So to be honest, not having a 100 and at least 20 Hz refresh rate on this display is a little bit baffling to me in this price range, considering this is not really running any kind of like Snapdragon Gen 2 or whatever. It's running some kind of proprietary Google chip called Google Tensor G2. I have no idea how well this actually runs. I haven't actually checked anything about this phone prior to just looking at the specs that are literally opened on my screen right now. So, like I said, I have not much idea about the performance of this phone, but the price would suggest that it's like on a low end of high-end flagship phones, or just a mid-range phone. Though, like I said, I'm just basing this on the price tag. Now, with that being said, we also have an HDR10 Plus certification, a peak brightness of 1400 nits. So that's pretty freaking bright, though I believe, if I remember correctly, Apple peaked at like 2000, I think it was. So that was already quite insane brightness. Now just to kind of like maybe max it out. Okay, right now it's maxed out, though you don't really get to see that bright of a display. So now peak brightness isn't necessarily accessible to you right away, so it's not like you're gonna just pull it down, boom, 1400 nits. It's accessible only in like really certain scenarios. For instance, if you go outside into the direct sunlight, then the phone will boost up the brightness to, for instance, like the aforementioned 1400 nits. And usually, I'm not sure if that's the case right here, usually it is not going to be running in this kind of brightness for prolonged times. It's just kind of like a couple minutes and then it drops it down. For some reason it just doesn't keep it like that. Maybe it's due to burn-ins or anything like that. I have no idea, to be completely honest. But anyway, moving off of the display, or maybe just one more or two more mentions. 48, almost 40, gee, what a 40, 84 or almost 85% screen to body ratio, and 416 pixels per inch. So pixels per inch, basically the kind of like a standard right now. So nothing really special right here, but also it's not like it's lacking. Now if we flip it over, we do have dual camera setup. I do have to commend Google for not including garbage sticker cameras like the 2 megapixel macro or 2 megapixel depth. So we do have a 50 megapixel wide sensor and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. Honestly, pretty decent setup for a phone like this. Really happy that they didn't include any like trash. Now at the front we have a single camera right over here. Can you see it right now? And this is a 10.8 megapixel, kind of weird, megapixel sensor, and it's an ultra wide one. So there we go. Those are basically all the cameras. Now in terms of recording with them, you can record at 4K, 30, 60, and 1080p, 30, 60, 120 to 40. Those will be slow motions. And in terms of front-facing camera, you can do basically the same thing. 4K, 30, 60, 1080p, 30, 60, minus the slow motion. So pretty decent camera setup right here for recording. And obviously you get the nice Google camera coloring and just overall performance from the camera. So that's usually one of the reasons to go for a Pixel for the camera quality right here. And obviously with these models, I think these ones are the first ones that decided to up the megapixels on their camera, so you should have a sharper image right now over the previous models. So again, just a decent upgrade to a previous one. And unlike the previous one, at least the non-pro version, this one has at least higher refresh rate, but like I mentioned, it's just 90 instead of the 120 that I would be expecting from a phone like this. So now moving on to just the last part, which would be the internals. We have a 4355 mAh battery, pretty decent size for a phone that is relatively compact, to be honest. It's running 8 gigabytes of RAM with a 128 or 256 gigabyte storage. The one that I have right here is, where the heck is it? I have no clue what it is. Right here. Oh, there we go. Found it. So this is the 128 gig storage, which is like right here. So this is the entry model in all kind of like purposes of it. And I'll mention one more thing. When it comes down to storage, you don't have expandable storage in here. It just takes an SD card. So let me just pop out the tray and you should be able to see it. There we go. So it's just a single SIM tray. Nothing else. You don't even get dual SIM tray, just a single one. So a little bit of a bummer if you wanted to extend storage using an SD card. You don't have that opportunity right here. And with that being said, there's not much more to say about the phone. The only thing that is left would be the charging specs. So as you've seen, we don't have a charger in the case, but you can charge this phone at 30 watts and advertised charging speed will be 50% battery in 30 minutes from basically fully dead. We also have wireless fast charging at 20 watts and power delivery 3.0. And obviously because we have wireless fast charging, we also have a reverse wireless charging. So if you have buds that you can wirelessly charge, for instance like the Galaxy Buds, you could just kind of slap them at the back and charge them. Though you do need to obviously enable that in the settings. It's only, you always have to enable it when you want to utilize it, and when you stop using it, it turns off automatically after like a couple minutes. So there we go. So that's basically all the specs of the phone. Now, in terms of the build quality, you can see we just have a typical Google kind of build quality. It really didn't change much, as you can obviously see. The visor kind of look at the back, it changed just a little bit, but it's still very similar to what it was before. And even though it sticks out quite a lot, like you can basically grab this, as you can see the phone by the visor. It has its benefits. So when you put it on the table, it has literally zero wobble. Well, maybe if you press it right here, you would lift it up, but unlike other phones, zero wobble right here. So that's a really nice thing to have. Glass back, obviously you can see, and the phone in general looks pretty sleek, nice. One thing that I guess I would say might be missing here is a headphone jack. It is a $500 phone, but I'm pretty sure there was enough space right here to include a headphone jack. So yeah. Now, the kind of argument about the headphone jack, I personally don't really care for it, because I have been using wireless headset since like they almost came out. But obviously I'm not the only person on the planet, and I know plenty of you still use headphone jacks. So fortunately you won't get that here, and unfortunately as well, you're not getting anything like the Type-C to headphone jack adapter. You only get the Type-C to USB, which in certain arguments, probably some people might have more usability of the Type-C to headphone rather than this. So anyway, with that being said, I think it's a pretty decent phone. Obviously it's Google Pixel, so it's going to be at the very top of what you can get from the actual OS on here. And previous Google Pixel did offer a lot of little things that were not accessible on any other phone. Like, for instance, you could give voice commands to your phone when certain things are happening. It always had the option to listen to music that is around you, and then give you always on your lock screen just a message of what right now is playing and whatever you are. So if a phone is hearing some kind of tune, it would just give you that. It's a really nice things that were added to the OS that basically no other phone had, and I think still to this day probably not very many phones have it. Probably some of the more interesting ones would be things like, for instance, if someone is calling you, you can just say drop or pick up without even touching the phone. It could be somewhere on a table, you might be far away. You can give a voice command and it will do it, which is really nice. You can pause the music using your voice. There's a lot of emphasis from Google on voice commands. I guess they probably want to really push the Google Assistant and all that stuff. But in general, it had a bunch of decent features in the OS itself that would make up over the actual like little bit lackluster hardware, because 90 Hz is a little bit lackluster, but at least they did improve the display just a little bit. In general, I think probably the best way to describe this phone is an improvement over the Pixel 6, which is a nice thing because they improved the hardware wise, and software already was ahead of the competition, and it still is. So there we go. This would conclude the overview of this phone, and it's, like I said, a pretty nice device. So with that being said, if you found this very helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.